Hello, everyone. This is Women on the Move Book Club, and it is Thursday, February the 6th. The year is 2025, and I am so excited today. We are going to discuss a phenomenal book, and we actually have the author with us. So we'll just start with introductions first. And I'm Cindy.
I'm Angie.
I'm Vivian.
I'm Tammy.
Zaid. I'm Zadie.
And I'm Linda.
I'm Sam.
And then, last but not least, I'm going to introduce Melody to everyone. She's the host of tonight's book club, so I will let Melody introduce herself and she'll take it away.
I'm Melody, and today we're reading or we're discussing Deep as the Sea, Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea. I don't know. Sorry, I'm not very good at this. And I would like to introduce our author. And Rita, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to mess up your last name, so I apologize. Rita Chang-Eppig. Is that correct?
That's actually exactly spot on. So we're good.
Good. Well, I'm so excited about this story. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how I found it. My girls are avid readers. They love to read, and two of them were when I talked about the fact that we were going to do a historical fiction and something that the author's done that's like their first debut. My second daughter said, "You've got to read this one, Mom." And so she and I have been reading it together. So it's been fun to kind of go off of that. And I wasn't really familiar with the background story. And so this was very exciting for me. So Rita, can you go ahead and kind of give us a little bit of background about you? And then I'll ask a few questions. I don't know, how much time do you have with us?
I can stay until 6:30.
Okay, perfect. All right. Can you give us a little background about you?
Yeah. So I wrote this novel probably started writing it in 2016 or so, and then it finally came out in 2023. So for those of you who are writers, you probably know writing a book is an arduous and long process that by the time the book is published, you feel like a very different person from who you were when you first started writing it. But I actually came to writing a little bit circuitously. I got my PhD in clinical psychology first, and then I worked as a psychologist for a number of years before I went back to school to get the MFA. And so one of the reasons that I really kind of got caught on the idea of writing about this particular historical figure is that I wanted to approach writing about her not as a heroine or a villain, because I think in a lot of the current stories that are told about her, she's either like this, she's awesome, she like commanded this pirate fleet, or where I grew up in Taiwan, she's talked about more as like a villainess, like she's this woman who did horrible, horrible things. And so as a psychologist, I wondered, well, what would it be like if we wrote about her as a multifaceted human being that, had positive qualities and also very negative qualities. Like I wanted to explore her as a complex figure. And so that's kind of what really got me started on the path of writing this book. And I was very fortunate that Bloomsbury wanted to publish it, and I worked with an amazing editor, and they gave me, I think, a gorgeous cover. I always wanted to have a cover that I would be proud to emblazon everywhere, and I think I got that. So that's kind of the very, very annotated short history of this novel.
It's so interesting to me that you said that, because that's exactly what I felt about when I was reading about this character. I don't know about anybody else, but it felt like a whole person, not just someone who was glorified here or, like you said, villainized. It felt like, okay, we could really actually see the struggles. So I don't know, what does anybody else think about that?
I think during that time, she did what she had to do in order to survive. And at times I felt sorry for her because I really think she wanted to be more of a mother or a wife or whatever, but the way life was back at that time, she had to be this person in charge.
Yeah,
Right.
that was almost her, I don't want to say like excuse for everything she did. But the alternative wasn't really great either. I mean, as she kept saying, the famines were coming and you end up being married off and it could be good or it could be bad, you know. So she took charge of herself and then she excused some of the really horrible things she did with that, but then that human part, that mother part came through in, in the actions she made with people that she met that she felt were also victims.
Mm-hmm.
Rita, I
Yes.
think you aptly described her as multifaceted. And since you said that, it kind of turned the light on for me because one segment of the book said, she says, I did not choose this life. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
well, no, for the majority of the time, you did not choose that life. But that one instant when you had the opportunity to let it go, you
Mhm.
went back into that life. So
Mm-hmm.
I can see that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry if I may, like, I think one of the things that I noticed a lot working as a psychologist was that people sometimes know change is very hard to, like if you've gotten used to something, it's really hard to make yourself do something that would take you in a completely different direction. And she did have you're right, she had a moment of choice, she had a
Moment.
crucible, but like, I think for her, she was so used, she didn't really know what her life would look like outside of the fleet anymore. And so she made the decision to continue with the piracy. But yeah, I'm so glad that you pointed that out, that she didn't have a choice except for the moments where she did. And that change was just too hard for her to initiate.
Exactly. And I think
When
that
she
she
was,
felt more in control of her life staying with the fleet, where she had more control over the choices and things that happened to her being in that position.
well, at the end of the book, when she was crying, um, I was like, well, are you crying because you have to make that change now? You don't have a choice? Or was she crying because she was going to miss that part
Mm-hmm.
of her life because that part of her life was over?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was a really interesting part of the book, that her position and how she was now looking at her future being so different.
That's true. Very true.
Well,
So,
as a woman who is getting slightly older, and maybe losing some of the things that she had when she was younger, she at least set up enough money that she could do what she wanted to do. So she was leaving the excitement, but she was also leaving the life that she had when she was younger, when any choice she made, she ended up feel like being a victim. One line that's in the story, when it's one of the ones about the goddess,
Mhm.
Mazao, is that right?
Yeah, Mazo.
Where, okay, where she says, you know, beauty is what men seek, and failing that, they defile. So they either want to own you, or then if you won't let them own you, they'll just use you. So there, and that's kind of the life she had before she took control of it, and she had the power that allowed her to be free, and that's what she says at another part, you know.
right. Um, you guys are all hitting on things that I was thinking of asking. So this is really good. I do want to ask you, Rita, how did you first come across this story? And the rest of you too, were any of you familiar before you read the story with this? I guess you could say it's kind of a legend, but not, I mean, not really legend. It has some truth to it. Correct, Rita? And where did you first hear about the story?
Yeah, so growing up in Taiwan, and so because Taiwan is so close to China, we share a lot of the same stories and myths, and we have a lot of the same kind of historical figures. I remember I think I was maybe like 8 or 9, and I was reading a children's book about pirates, and she was mentioned in one line. So her husband, the one who dies, I don't think I'm giving anything away, right? Like I don't
Yeah,
think I'm spoiling anything at this point. They were like, oh, he was this feared pirate, and the line was basically something like, also his wife helped, right? Like so it was just this like, also his wife helped, and I was like, I remember going like, well, how did she help? Like, there to me there was a bigger story, but I was 8 or 9, so I didn't have the resources to go do research or write a book or anything like that. And then, but the story stayed with me. And then as I grew up, and I kind of would like occasionally I would just like be like, oh, let me look her up again and see if I've forgotten any details or if they found anything new about her. I noticed that all of the names that are used to refer to her in Chinese. So the most common names for her, if you like Google her or like search for her on Wikipedia, are Zheng Yisang or Qingxi. Those are the two names that she's best known by. And both of those names translate, they're not her name, they translate to Zheng's wife. So like, and I just remember thinking like, wow, she was this really, she co-led, she co-commanded a pirate fleet, and everybody refers to her as Zhang's wife, and so I think that was something that I also wanted to, in a way, I kind of wanted to give her name back. I wanted to have her commemorated for, I'm not saying she was a great person. She did lots of terrible things, but I think she at least deserved to have her name attached to her reputation once again. So that's one of the things I wanted to try to
You
do.
know what was really interesting to me was that we've always heard of pirates and what pirates do, and we've always put that in the realm of being a man. And
Mhm.
then to find a woman that was equally as powerful as any known pirate, that was the one thing that kind of really stuck with me throughout the whole book, is that this woman is well respected by her peers and by the fleet that she led. And so she was a tough lady.
She was, yeah. I think some historians say that she had the largest pirate fleet in the world at the time
Wow.
of her gestation, but in the world. So, I mean, I'll listen to the historians because I'm not a historian myself.
Okay.
And I was not familiar with her prior to the story, so it was exciting for me to read.
Yeah. Yeah. When I started reading it, I was like, wow, I've never read a book quite like this before. It was just a page turner, couldn't put it down. It
Oh,
was
thank you.
so good.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think she suffered so much. There was so much tragedy in her life. And then when she married, I mean, she was the one who was her husband. She was beautiful. I mean, he wanted her, but there was a semblance of love there. And then that didn't last very long. So it's like I just saw suffering, suffering, but then she overcame so much and she was revered, she was respected, and she was targeted because of her strength.
And see, that was one question I had throughout the book. Did she ever really experience love? Her children were taken almost immediately when they were born. Her husband she chose because he was better than being a prostitute. So
Correct.
she said, I'll choose this. And I think she respected him and she learned a lot from him. But did she really ever experience love?
Right. And the second husband, she didn't love at all. That was
That was
just,
a business arrangement.
yeah,
Correct.
business, to keep her fleet on
Mhm.
there. So yeah, I don't think she ever experienced love.
I think with the second husband, there towards the end there, from what I could see, I don't know, Rita, if you were trying to do that at all, but you could kind of see that there was a bit of an attraction, and a possible respect in that, it was her idea basically to, well, most of the big power plays, she was the one who was successful, where he kind of was, I guess, kind of flew off the handle. But then when, she made that pact, it really was her idea, at least in this story. And from what I can see after I read the story and decided to read up a little bit more on it, it sounded like she was the one, kind of the brains behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so both husbands had that respect, in that she had those smarts to know what to do, and the intuition to know when people were playing her or when they weren't. Like there was another fleet that had a woman in there who
Exactly.
actually, I think, was being played by, the Dutch or whatever it was, or the English. So I think, yes, did she ever have that love? I think the most love she had was with her friendships.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She had some close
Yeah.
emotional friendships with both Wu Yet and Yayan.
Young.
Yeah. And those were very important to her. And she came to the plate on all those, where she really, and I think, it was professional respect from both sides, it seemed like, in her two marriages, is what she had. But she had some true friendships, and they guided what she did.
According to Wikipedia, it says that her fleet composed of 400 junks and between 40,000 to 60,000 pirates, and that was in 1805. That was before she, whatever. So, anyways, that's one of those thoughts.
Yeah, I think the question about love is a really good. So first of all, I think you're all absolutely right. I think her friends represent the best of her. Like Woyet and Yan Yan, they are in many ways her moral compass, especially Woyet. I think she, doing that kind of a job for that long, I think it can really distort your sense of right and wrong. And so in a way, like, she needed her friends to be there and say, like, maybe this is not such a good idea. And yeah, I think she definitely, I think, has an affection for her second husband by the end of the book, but at the very beginning, it's more like, all right, I want to keep my fleet, so how do we work this out? But I do, yeah. Again, I think I approach this a little bit as a psychologist, because in the records, she herself, like, the way she ended up in the brothel was that she was sex trafficked, right? And so I think that after experiencing that kind of trauma, and it wasn't like a one, you know what I mean? Like, she was forced to stay there for many years until she met Zhang Yi. And so I have to imagine that distorts your sense of how much you can trust men in general. Like, and I think that love would be love for men would be a very difficult concept for her to kind of get accustomed. Like, she would grapple with it a little bit more, I think, than the average person.
I agree. Any more thoughts on that? Okay. Rita, I'm curious to know two things. One, what did you like most about your story, your characters, what you created, and what did you like least?
Oh, that's a great question, especially the one about what I like least, because I think I'll start there, because I think there's a way, if you talk to most authors, I think they'll admit that there's a moment after their book comes out when they go, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. Like, they have a moment of deep regret. And I will say this, I kind of regret going with the title that I went with, because it is a hard, like, I even have trouble, I wrote it and I even have trouble kind of saying it in one breath sometimes. And so I realized that it actually made it very hard for people to communicate about the book and talk about the book, because, like, half the time you're going, what was the title again? It was like 8 words, like, what adjective goes with which noun? Like, it's so I think at the time when I came up with the title, I was trying to think poetically, And I think in retrospect, I really should have just done something much simpler that would be easier marketing.
Did it come from a poem from the poet who wrote the other poems? Is that
No, unfortunately not. Although that would have been a great idea. Thank you for telling me this now that the book has been published. But no. At the time, I was just thinking about how everything like nothing in her world is quite what it seems. It's kind of like what the fortune teller said at one point. It's like nothing in your world. And so I was like, oh, I want to go with something that's like a little. It's not deep as the sea. It's the sky that's deep. And like this, the sea is instead of the sea being blue, which is what most of us think the sea is. So I was trying to do a title that was like a little bit like askew, a little bit weird, to represent that nothing in her world is what it seems. But again, I think I kind of wish I had just made a different decision. But hindsight's 2020. And
I have to say, can I just say, I actually like the title. I know it's harder to say, but I like it because it kind of makes you think. It makes you go, oh, okay, And I like that too. So just letting you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, there are definitely days I regret it, but it's really nice to hear that it was thought provoking for you. And in terms of things I like, I mean, I did really enjoy writing the scenes of friendship between Sekyung and both Woyet and Yang Yang, because I think those are some of the only moments in the book where you get to see her soft. Do you know what I mean? I think like after like writing hundreds of pages of her being hard and ruthless and calculating, it was a little bit therapeutic for me to have moments where it's like she's just chatting with her friends and they're both being silly and cracking jokes together, and like that's to me that those scenes humanize her in a way that right. And so those were really fun for me to write.
I think you also saw in those scenes, and at least that I did, not only their friendship, but she took on that protector mode, the mothering kind of with both of them, and you just saw that that's really kind of almost her true self in a sense. That was like, she didn't want to be this hard, person, and she really wanted to just protect them, which even though I'm not going to say it right, the last little girl, that when she left her with her daughter and said, "This is where you're staying," even though it looked as if she was hurting her, she was actually trying to protect her from just what had happened. So anyways, that's my take on it. Anybody else? Was there a favorite?
Back to the title. One of the things that I thought about after reading it and after, thinking it through, I was thinking, well, I guess red as the sea meant all of the blood that was shed from all of the fighting and stuff that took place. So that's one connection that I made. And I was thinking that that's what you were thinking about. I don't know.
Yeah, no. That's definitely red. Is like, why is the sea red? Because it's been, dyed with blood. But the other reason, of course, is because the color of the fleet is like they were actually historically called the Red Banner Fleet, the Red Flag Fleet. Okay. And so so it was meant to be a allusion to those two things. But you're absolutely right about the blood.
Okay.
Did you have a second title you were thinking of?
Honestly, at one point I asked my editor if we could just have that title so that it was just Red as the Sea. So no Deep as the Sky, just Red as the Sea. And my editor is actually the one who was like, no, I think that she liked the fact that there were these two parts of the title. So she convinced me to keep both parts.
So now I noticed that you've written other books, and I wanted to know, are the other books that you've written, are they a continuation or a connection to this story at all?
I've published quite a number of short stories, but I haven't published a second book yet. The second book is currently in the works. I'm actually working with my agent on it right now. We're hoping to be able to submit it within the next few months. But But no, yeah, again, this idea about this woman pirate just really stuck with me, and I felt like I had to write one book about her. I felt like I just needed to tell her side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's going to be some kind of sequel or follow up to it. I tend to kind of like have these, I'll go through a period of a few years where I'm really fixated on a certain idea. And so I think I've moved on to a new idea.
Okay.
So I have a question. I know you don't have a whole lot of time, but I was wondering about that, the blind, not blind
Mhm.
oracle and her poems that she was reading from, or so I mean, because I mean I spent a lot of time on those poems. I was really, I mean, because I found them very interesting, and so was she totally fictionalized from you? And how do you see her in there? Was she there from Packling, or because she got the right she got it right at the end, and I don't
Yep.
know if that's because she knew what was going on or what. So I was just interested in her.
Yeah. Yeah. Several people have asked me that question, and I deliberately left it a little bit vague, but in my mind, she's not actually, I think she actually has a little bit of the gift, right? Like she has a little bit of but this is a common thing where like, I feel like somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. Like I feel like in ancient Greece, they also had like if they saw like blind people were considered more likely to be oracles or seers or something because
Mm-hmm.
the idea is like you don't see the mundane world, you see the spiritual. And so I was kind of playing with this idea like she was a very poor, like working on the streets as a street fortune teller, and maybe she came up with this idea at some point, like, oh, if people think I'm, touched by the gods, then I'll make more money as a fortune teller. But she actually does have a little bit of something, and unfortunately, because Sekyung is by the end, especially, she's really kind of losing her grip on
Mhm.
her own moral, not just the fleet, but her own morality. I think she killed the wrong person. That's kind of the way that I see it in my mind.
Oh, okay, thank you. Interesting.
It's like she just got fearful of everything. And so that in her mind was where everything started.
She got paranoid. Like I think a lot of people, once they feel like their position is getting threatened, they start to get a little bit paranoid about the people around them that they can or can't trust.
Mm.
Did anybody else have any other questions for Rita, like towards with the book or anything? My question, and you started to talk about it a little bit, but what are you working on now? Or can you
Right.
give us an idea, or is that like taboo? Can't do that.
No, yeah, I'm not technically supposed to give too many details, but it's about two siblings, and they are so there's always my writing. There's always a little bit of like a fantasy, edge. Like there's something a little bit magical happening, but they have a mother who has been diagnosed with dementia, and they're kind of dealing with it in their own respective ways.
Okay, nice.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll look forward to that.
Exactly.
That's so kind. And yeah, and thank you all. I do have to hop off, but I'm really appreciative when people take the time to read my book. Like you have many things to do with your day. Like you don't have to, read my stuff. So thank you for reading. Thank you for having me. And I wish all of you the best, and have a great rest of the weekend.
You too.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
so very much,
you.
Rita.
Thank
We
you.
love your book.
Yeah,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
the
you.
book.
Oh my gosh, that was phenomenal.
That's so fun.
Absolutely. Melody, you have to share with us. Did you reach out to her via email? How did you reach out to her to get
That's the
her?
first time I've seen her face to face. I only did it through email. And what had happened is I think when I was looking, either I looked on her website or I looked in the back of the book. I can't remember, but it said something about if you want to have me on I can't even remember, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to just email her. So I emailed her and just asked if by some chance she would be available because we were going to be reading her book. And she was like, yeah, let me know when it comes closer to time. And I'll try and block it off as much as I can. So anyways, I just thought it was fun.
Wonderful.
That was
What a
awesome.
treat.
And she's a beautiful lady inside and out. I love the
Yeah.
fact that she's a psychologist. And the question that you asked her is like, how did you get this idea? And then the standpoint that she took and her background, that was in her writing, where we saw, like you said, Linda, the multifaceted personality and character of Sekyun. It's like when she pronounced the names, it was like, okay, that's good, because the
Okay.
husband, however she said that, I was saying Chin Yet, but she said something
Yeah.
else. It
Yeah.
sounded like Zinya, or I don't know, but that was
Uh-huh.
beautiful.
Yeah. That
Well,
was the hardest part, was the
With the
names.
names,
Yes.
yeah.
That
I
was
agree.
yeah.
The names.
I started reading it and then I went ahead and did it on audio just so that I could kind of get the names a little bit better. So I was
Okay.
doing both, just because I am not very good with pronouncing names. I mean, I'm a teacher, but I have to, when I've had to have kids, I'm like, okay, you're gonna have to repeat it to me a couple times and then I'll get it. But but it's like, you don't language is such a different thing. And so anyways, that was one of those things. So I guess I have a question to all of you. Were any of you familiar with this story at all?
No,
No,
No.
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 So,
No.
But I do say, after I read it, we had got information about the spice trade, which talks about that area and the pirates that went through there, and the Portuguese and the Dutch. And I was like, oh, I just read about that. It was really interesting.
yeah. So what was interesting is this character is kind of semi introduced in the Pirates of the Caribbean. And when my daughter told me to read it, she goes, it's kind of based off the one character that's like, it's like three Pirates of the Caribbean in or something like that. And I was like, oh, I do remember that, but it was very brief. And so it's they kind of drew from that history. And then I started reading, after I was done, I read the history, and her Wikipedia has it very closely to how she's kind of written things, some of the different ideas. The only thing is there's 3 sons and a daughter that is not named, and they're not sure exactly when she was born. So, and the 2 sons are still with the first original husband, and then the other one, it looks like, is with the Zhang Bao or something, that the second husband. And so
Jane Poe.
Zhang Po, that's
Yes.
it.
No, that's the first husband. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, and what I noticed is, as I was reading through it, she's actually referenced here in the Wikipedia. So that was nice that she just had written a story that was about that. So I was just curious. I had kind of heard in somewhere about there being and part of it is my daughter really studied Japanese and different things like that, and she had some friends who were from China, Japan, and Taiwan, and they had kind of talked about a little bit of it, but I wish I would have asked more when I saw them, because I was like, okay, it's like a story that's been passed down to them. So,
I think our education is so Anglo-centric that we don't get things like this. I mean, I never read anything like this, and that's why I read. That's why I join book club, so I can learn something. So
you're absolutely correct, and I think that is the one thing that we don't do well in this country at all, is just really give the history all the way, not just the United States, but just history in general. And there's it's kind of cherry picked. So that's my opinion. You can take it. Let's see. I'm going back to my little things here. Did I guess, how thought provoking was this for you guys? What did it create anything in you that it was like, okay, that changed my opinion of something, or I learned something from this? What was your thought?
Well, I'm like Zadie. When we learned about the spice trade, it kind of connected
It
this
did.
story to what we were learning about. And during the time that I was reading the book, before I knew about the spice trade, I I felt sorry for her living in that time, that type of a life, you know.
Yeah.
And I was grateful that we're in a modern age and didn't have to go through that type of a struggle. But every culture has their struggles, and it's good to learn about them.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And how they survived. I mean, because even the little villages, learned to survive the pirates and learned to either work with them or,
Exactly.
To do the different
Right.
things. And I even appreciated the fact at the end there when she was, trying to negotiate for her crew and for everyone else, that she point blank said to them, don't trust these people too much, because there's something more that they're wanting to get from you guys. And how true that really was. And I just appreciated that. It made me, I don't know, it made me think of another part of the world and how it ties to us, where we came, and just the search for those treasures, whether they be spices, whether they be gold, whatever. um Anyways, that's what I found.
I thought it gave a very a very multifaceted set of information about it because we learned a little bit about the goddess that she was interested in. We had the poetry that was when I looked it up, it said Sushin poetry poems by who was like I don't know 800 or something or 1000. He wrote all these different poems, and that's what they were memorizing, and and they had throughout their culture. And I mean, all those little things. And then just the glimpse at the peasant life that was just so hard, so close. I mean, um, yeah, just her village life, that little bit glimpse that you got of the villages. I have to say, I really enjoyed the character Pak Ling, the government agent who
Oh, yeah,
pretended to be the beggar and stuff like
right.
that.
Yes.
I just kind of enjoyed that, almost like a match for her, somebody that she could really spar with intellectually, you know.
Oh,
So,
I agree.
But I must say, and I don't know if everybody else experienced this, at the beginning, it was hard to get into the
Yes.
story,
Yeah.
because it was just so new to me and so different. And it took off really quickly. So, but once I got into it, then I was okay. I could follow it. But at first, all the names were hard to take in and keep up with all the different personalities and the different people. But once I did, then I was hooked on the story.
Yeah.
every
Yes.
time a name came up, I wrote it down and what something
Yes.
about them so that I could, because if they came back again, sometimes I didn't know they did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the names
They
were
took me.
similar, and for me, they
Yeah.
were, so.
It's
Yeah.
And
That.
I think that was the same for me. I agree with Vivian that the names, I just had a really hard time keeping up with who was who as far as the names were concerned. But one of the other things that I saw is it really didn't matter where you are in the world. There were similar things going on with numerous cultures. Numerous things were happening all over the world, but they were the same, like the
Uh-huh.
spice trade and the piracy. It was kind of a universal problem.
yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And it was interesting how they dealt with them differently,
Yes.
um I agree. It was just enlightening to know how different things and how people adapt, and because looking at her story, she adapted to the flower boats. Didn't want to. She told, you know, she was planning on, you know, fishing with her brother and her dad,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
being in the village. And so she liked being on the boats. That wasn't the problem. But then when she, you know, was taken, and then, you know, hated the flower boats. But here's this guy comes along and notices something different. Of course, he's, you know, got his own attractions going on. But um, so then she adapted to that life, you know. And at the end there, I agree. I don't know who was talking about her crying. I do think it was somewhat saying goodbye to that and trying to figure out, okay, what's next? Because I've had to be so strong. I've had to not be a nice person in some respects. And now how do I balance that? How do I bring it back? You know, so.
Yeah, I felt like she was saying, you know, this life is over. What am I doing? What am I going to do now? You know,
Yes.
so she was sad about that. That's what she learned how to do. I mean, that was her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like Vivian. I really had a difficult time, especially with the names. But
Yeah.
I'm the type of person, when I read a book, I get vested in one character. One character.
Yes.
That character has to be my hero throughout the book. And I couldn't do that with her. I hated her on certain pages and sympathetic with her on certain pages, and oh my goodness, why on certain pages. So it was like the waves in the ocean, up, down, calm, rough. But it was a good read.
I know.
Yes, it was.
There was times I wanted to say, just talk to them.
But when you think about all that she overcame being
Right.
a female, that's why I mean, I just think she was absolutely phenomenal
Yes, yes, she
because
was.
the mental wherewithal. I mean, you're being prostituted, you're being abused emotionally, physically. You're just a young girl. And then her dad gets killed tragically. You know, she's finally with her dad and her brother. And then, you know, all of this happens. And then, you know, she's sold to this, what's a prostitution? The lady who ran
Flower,
it.
The flower boats.
flower boats.
The flower
Yeah.
boat.
So anyway, and isn't that ironic? Flower boats.
Flower boats,
Flower boats.
yeah.
I mean, I can
Yes.
picture them in those cultures, and then you know you're just getting raped and pillaged. But anyway, she just overcame so much, and I mean,
She
there
did.
was a hardness to her, but she survived.
She
Well,
did.
her husband taught her how to lead,
Yes,
Uh-huh.
he
and
did.
he taught her how to lead with ruthlessness.
Yes,
You know, and then she learned. I mean, she learned how to do it from him.
exactly.
But
But
she had the beginnings of it, because that's why he went with her in
Yeah,
the first
right.
place,
Saw
because she
that.
resolved an issue on the flower boats.
yeah,
And he said, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
You got a head on your shoulders.
She was
Absolutely.
smart. She was smart.
Made a
Yes,
good
she was.
choice. He did
yeah.
because that was his
You know,
family's business. His family was wealthy,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that was their business.
Right.
Right. Right. I have to say, I kept hoping that she would go back to her village, and there was that possibility of reconnecting with somebody or something. But then at the same time, you know, they talked about her, what you call them, the aunties, or
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yes, the
that
auntie
they weren't,
would accept it.
they weren't accepting of her. Now her
Right.
brother and her dad were, but you know, so then I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense, you know. But you know, you always have that, you know, fairy tale like, oh, they reconnect and he actually survived or something like that, you know. But at the same time, I liked what I liked how she formed this character, because you're right, Zadie, Linda, I don't know, I think it was Linda. It was hard to like her with certain. There were times that I was like, no, don't do that. You know, you got to do this. But when I heard Rita, how she said she didn't want to make her heroine, and she didn't want to make her a villain
Villain.
either. She wanted to kind of find that balance. I could see that. It was like, okay, you know what? You did accomplish that.
Surely
Because
did.
there were times that, yeah, I didn't like what she did. And there was times that I really like, oh, yes, you know? So,
Can I say this? Just, I'm really appreciative of us this year going through historical fiction,
Yeah.
because it's making us really look into the history of these books. And it made me think about my education coming up. Yes, we were taught history, but it just gave you a little glimpse
Glimpse.
at life, or at how things went, and not enough to really make us grasp onto what was really happening in different cultures and different societies. So this year, we're learning a lot about history as we're going through these books. So I appreciate us using historical fiction as our theme this year.
Vivian,
Exactly. Thank you, Vivian. I've enjoyed every single book. They've all been phenomenal.
I agree too. I missed the last week with you guys, and I think it was the librarian,
The
right?
personal
Personal
librarian.
librarian.
I told my kids, I'm like, you've got to read this book, and I need to go. We just got back from New York. I'm like, I need to go there now.
And they just mentioned her on the View the other day when they were going.
Did they?
They're talking about Black history, and so they mentioned her and showed her picture on the View as one of the first persons that they mentioned for Black History Month. So I was really
Excellent.
proud. I knew who she was.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. I've enjoyed the historical fiction. It's been so good. I mean, I didn't know what to expect with this one, but I knew it was, and it was a different culture, and I was looking forward to that. So so I'm excited. I can't say that I have any more. You guys keep answering all the questions that I was going to ask, because I was thinking, does anybody have a favorite quote? We talked about that. Does anybody have a favorite thing that they bookmarked? Is there anything else that you guys want to say about this?
It was a great book.
I know.
Yes.
I just want to say it was excellent. And Melody, hats off to you to reaching out to the author.
Right.
Yes,
I'm glad we got
Thank you.
to, and she was so wonderful. She was really
She
nice.
was
It
gracious.
really was.
it was. Yes.
Excellent.
I do
Well, oh, go ahead.
I do look forward to seeing what she does have come out, just to see,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw her name on other writings, and I thought they were books. And one of them is Rouge Comme Le Mur. Well, that's the French name, but her name is on there as the author. It's a paperback book.
I think
It was short stories.
I think they're short.
Right. She
Okay.
said they're shorts.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
So,
Awesome.
they might.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Melody.
No, they may have collected them for her, but I just, in looking at her background, she's been published in just like magazines and stuff like.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Good
Awesome.
job.
Well, this concludes the book club where we discussed Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea by Rita Chang-Eppig. And I hope you enjoyed our book club. Thank you for tuning in.